Good morning. So one of the things, those of you who know, I love history. And so one of the things that I do with history that kind of makes it come alive to me is I try in my mind to imagine what it would be like to being in the time that I'm thinking about. So I want you to kind of do this with me a little bit today. I want you to go back to a really challenging moment. Imagine that it's a Sunday morning and you are going to worship in Germany in the days right after the Second World War. Every city in Germany is in rubble. The concentration camps and the showers in which 6 million Jews, men, women, and children, had been murdered in, were just newly shut down. And the evil of the Nazi regime was evident all around you. And you drag yourself into church to worship. A church that had not spoken out against Hitler and his Nazis. And then imagine hearing these words being taught by Jesus Christ.
You have heard that it was said to those who lived long ago, don't commit murder, and all who commit murder will be in danger of judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with their brother or sister will be in danger of judgment. If they say to their brother or sister, you idiot, they will be in danger of being condemned by the governing council. And if they say, you fool, they will be in danger of fiery hell. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift at the altar and go. First, make things right with your brother or sister, and then come back and offer your gift. Be sure to make friends quickly with your opponents while you are there with them on your way to court. Otherwise, they will haul you before the judge. The judge will turn you over to the officer of the court, and you will be thrown into prison. I say to you in all seriousness that if you won't get out of there until you paid the very last penny.
How do you, after everything that's happened, reconcile with your opponents, your enemies? Enemies that have witnessed your complicity in murder. How do the people worshiping in churches in this nation, back here in the United States, how did they not condemn their German brothers and sisters? Because every congregation in this country had bled in that war. Blood spilled by people who called themselves fellow Christians in another land. And so if you were sitting on that Sunday morning in Germany, how do you make things right? Can you? Now, in those days that immediately followed the Second World War, the church in Germany did something unprecedented. They reached out. They made a decision to reach out to their sisters and brothers across the sea in a spirit of friendship. Now, many years have passed since the day that those churches in Germany chose to do that. Many years have passed. But this past summer, our own Aaron Bender from our congregation went to visit a church community that made a choice to reach out. A church community in Baden, Germany, where the previous summer her sister Liz and Nikki had gone. Today is World Communion Sunday. And Erin is going to tell you a little bit about her experience.
Good morning. Over the summer, I traveled to Germany through a youth exchange due to the partnership that the UCC has with the Evangelical Church of Germany. The trip was a total of 10 days, including travel, and I had the time of my life. I tried new foods, stepped foot in London and France, explored Heidelberg, which is the picture on the front of your bulletin, along with many other cities, and hiked in the Black Forest, just to name a few of the endless highlights. I would first like to say thank you to all of you for supporting Colonial Church, because whether you knew it or not, you played a role in making this amazing opportunity possible for me, and I am incredibly grateful because I know many people do not get this chance of a lifetime. I was actually the only youth from Colonial to go on the trip, but I traveled with a group from Plymouth Church and Lawrence, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. A month before this trip, the only people I knew personally were my German sisters, Fabian and Mara, from 2 summers prior when they came to the United States during a similar exchange and stayed with my family. And for some odd reason, I really wasn't afraid to travel with a group of people I had met briefly weeks before and land in the hands of mostly strangers in a new continent 5,000 miles away. Something felt familiar to me, and I was ready to take in whatever God wanted me to see on this trip. On the 4th day, after visiting a museum, eating some gelato, of course, and swimming at a beautiful lake, we ended up at a church where we met with another youth group. Now, this was a common occurrence throughout the trip. We had a schedule that told us where to go, or we were dropped off at a church building with a church-affiliated person meeting us there. And I'm not sure exactly, but somehow all of these people and places were connected. And they all welcomed us in ways I can't describe to you. The welcome was more of a feeling. At the meeting that evening, we played some games, and then we all sat in a circle. Our good friend Jorg played some guitar, and some of the more musically inclined youth led us in some songs. We sang in both English and attempted some German. And that's when it hit me. I was sitting in a room full of people I had just met or barely knew, an ocean away from home in a building I'll probably never step foot in again, worshiping with these amazing people, and I felt a peace that ensured me God was working in our lives. They welcomed us and prepared dinner for us and offered their friendship when they barely even knew who we were individually. But I realized how our faith can bring us together in ways that I never imagined, and this thought overwhelmed me but also comforted me. That night, on the way home, we stopped by the store to pick up some groceries, and then I watched a movie with my host mom and sisters. I would really like to say a little about my German family because they are a true family to me. My parents were so kind and made me as comfortable as possible. Fabian, Mara, and I laughed and were goofy with each other just like real sisters, and I think that everyone on the trip would tell you that the 3 of us were inseparable. It's incredibly crazy to me that somehow out of all the homes I could have been placed into, I connected so well with them. It was very hard to leave, and I'm so grateful to have access to technology today that allows me to keep in touch with them on a regular basis. We already want to plan another visit to see each other. This trip was not just incredibly fun, it was incredibly impactful. I saw how the churches there connected and worked together, even if they weren't right next door, and I think that is something we need to do more of here in the U.S. We talked about the reconciliation Pastor Aaron just spoke about, and I was able to see a real bunker from the war in Strasbourg, France, along with a few Holocaust memorials in the cities. But most of all, this trip made me realize that no matter the distance that separates us, or the limitations of time we have with each other, the one thing that will always center us together is our faith.
Erin did it. She went and she made connections, friendships. She felt what it means to be in a family of Christ. That no matter where you are, you walk in and you are part of the family. That's the way it should be. That didn't just happen, though. She is worshiping, playing, and becoming friends with the descendants of people who made a choice after the Second World War, who reached out after their sins, their complicity in the evils of Nazi Germany. And they chose to break bread, to admit the pain and the blood, the brokenness, but to recognize that we are called to something greater. We are called to a healing. And how does that happen? It was not easy. A relationship between the United Church of Christ and the Evangelical Church of Germany, the EKU, UCC, EKU, we love our acronyms. But as the custom of the time was, they got together for a lot of meetings. And those meetings laid the groundwork for exchanges between people that had been combatants against each other, wounded souls who were brought together as Christian brothers and sisters. And what they saw was that the power of love pushed back the darkness, the veil that had fallen. And through the tears and the embraces of these former soldiers, years after the war was done, relationships formed. A relationship between churches, between individuals that goes on to this day, spanning generations. Aaron, what you experienced this summer is the result of the power of forgiveness of sin and reconciliation that happened years ago. Now, many years have passed since the Second World War. Germany today houses refugee camps of thousands, tens of thousands of souls escaping the war in Syria. Our partner church in Baden, they are the center of refugee services in their area. And meanwhile, when it comes to refugee care, we're struggling with that in our own country right now. So earlier this year, there was a group from the church in Baden that came over and they were touring the Kansas City area. They were on tour with our conference here in the Kansas, Oklahoma area. And this group, we went out for dinner one night, and we talked late in the night. Fortunately, their English was a lot better than my German. But we talked late into the night about what they've experienced with the refugees in Germany. About how the national sentiment in Germany was starting to become less welcoming than it had been. And they sensed a similar sentiment in this nation. They spoke honestly from their history about the dangers of becoming complicit in racist, anti-religious, or ethnic persecution. Do you think that sharing experiences and thoughts like this might be needed in a time such as this? Now, today in Germany, very few people practice Christianity. It's single digits percentage-wise. Yet the influence of these church communities is huge. Because they're tax-funded, they marshal many of the social services in their areas and for their nation. And they're not divided into so many brands, like Aaron was saying. They've kind of working beyond the brands of Lutheran and Catholic and Methodist. They come together as a people to be a blessing to people who have largely rejected religion. Don't you think that their experience might be something for us to consider as a nation too? Now, the partnership that we formed so many years ago was a choice to reach out in the hope of friendship and peace to an opponent, somebody who had been labeled an enemy. It was a choice, a bold choice, to value the hope of reconciliation, what might be possible in Christ, and call that the best path. It was a path that forced an honest confession of sin. And it's from that place of honesty, that spirit of truth, that continues to bear fruit as new generations from each nation come together and face and pierce evil's new disguises, as we rediscover the hope and the power of reconciliation and forgiveness in our time, as we choose to come together.